My guest is a stand-up comedian from Seattle. He's been featured on Sirius XM and is a comedy special on Dry Bar titled "There's No I in Self-Esteem." I'm excited to welcome Kermet Apio.
All right, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Man.
Yeah.
Dude, I gotta say, it's kind of funny. Prior to asking you on, I was like confused on timing, and I thought your special like just dropped.
Oh,
and so like I watched it and I was like, oh, this is really good and all that. But then like I had talked to you about it and you kind of like, it was, you had mentioned like it had been a while since you had,
right.
Like, and then I saw the date, it was like 2017 and I was like, oh, I just totally was mistaken, but it holds up well. If you were curious, like it.
Well, that actually is a good point. I tried to make it where there's nothing too current or anything because I had a feeling that if this could last. And by the way, I was in the first batch that did it, and we had no idea what it was going to be. I mean, because they were saying, oh, we're gonna do this. We're gonna have Facebook ads, and we're gonna try and get 1 million hits on these things. And we were all like, oh, good. Yeah. Good luck with that. You know what I mean? Because all of us at that point had bought a Facebook ad.
Exactly.
And they made it happen. They did it. It was bizarre.
So you're the second person from Dry Bar coming on, I believe. The first was Drew, and I think we've talked about that episode a little bit, but Drew Barth.
Yeah.
And then next weekend I have Gabe coming on, Gabe Rutledge.
Right.
So I'm doing like kind of a group of Dry Bar folks. And it's funny, Drew came on and he talked about the Montana Run, the movie. And so prior to this episode and the one with Gabe, I've been watching that. And was that like you've seen it, right? The
Montana Run?
Yeah.
I'm in it.
Are you really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were in it.
I am a hoodlum 3 in the elevator.
Really?
There's a scene where she gets into the elevator and there's the hoodlum standing behind her, and it's kind of a silly joke.
Yeah.
But they say hit the floor and she drops down, and he said no, hit the number, right? And so I'm one of the guys.
I'm like halfway in it, so I haven't.
Oh, I'm sorry, I spoiled our joke.
But that's hilarious. Yeah. I didn't know that you were in it. I'm sort of like a nerd about Seattle comedy, like the history of Seattle comedy.
Right,
and that's why I wanted to have both you and Gabe on. It's always like been sort of this interesting, like comedy in general, like these scenes, they're so like, when you're in it, you're part of it, but then people come and they go, and it's like, you don't really realize like, oh, this actually is kind of like something we're going to look back on. And you were around a lot of like really interesting people, and notorious people. Like what year did you start?
First open mic was December of 89.
Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Wait, 89 or 88? I can't remember. I know I quit my day job in 91. So yeah, it was December of 88 because I was doing open mic about 2 years.
That's why I wasn't born yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I literally do. I do shows with comics who my career is literally older than.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Which is disturbing and also yet very fortunate. Like I never thought when I quit my day job, I never thought I was going to be doing this long. I thought this was going to be my backpacking through Europe. You know what I mean? Like that thing that you do for a couple of years. And I'd always have that story that I was a road comedian.
Was there ever like did anyone have that mindset that this was something you would do long term?
I think people did.
Okay.
Because so back then it was very different. If you got the Tonight Show or if you got one of the late night. Now late night there's so many late night shows. Well, back then there was Carson and Letterman was pretty much it. Mm-hmm. And so if you got either one of those, you could reasonably say that you could be in comedy long term.
Yeah.
Now there's just no calling. There's no way of really knowing, right? Because if you get Colbert, it's a good bump. It's helpful, but it doesn't have that impact that Carson had. And so comics actually thought if I could just get a 5-minute set on a late night show, that could write a ticket.
Wasn't that sort of Hedberg's obsession too? Like I read somewhere that he was always obsessed about getting the perfect tape for late night.
I think that was a little bit overblown.
Okay.
Because when he started, he wasn't, because I watched a booker one time sit there and tell him all these things, and we all knew in the back that he was funny, right? But he wasn't what we all know him to be. His setups are longer. His jokes weren't as quick. He had stories in the set. Anyway, but we all knew, like, wow, this guy looks at the world differently than we do. This guy's really funny. Yeah. But I sat there one time after an open mic and watched this booker tell him, you need to look up more and look at the audience, and you should probably smile more. Smile when you deliver your jokes. And back then his hair was like really, really long. And maybe cut your hair. It looks a little feminine. And we're sitting there going, are you serious? You want him to be the rest of us? You're trying to make him to us. Why don't you tell him to put on a blazer and a bolo tie and talk about airline food? Like they were literally like. And so, Mitch knew that he could do those things. He was funny enough that he would have gotten a late night show sooner. Yeah. So, in my opinion, I don't think he was that hungry for that. I shouldn't say that, because we actually talked a lot about getting on TV, and he one time we had a gig and we had a long drive and we were talking about it. And he said I think you're onto something. He said, I think being clean is the way to go, because there's more places you can be on TV. And it was a very interesting concept. So I know he was thinking about it, but I don't think he was, because if he was really obsessed with it, he wouldn't have done what he did. Yeah. But what happened was, so he went on, he and a comic named Chard Hogan, they spent a summer, they bought a cheap van, and they spent a summer driving around the country. They booked a few gigs at whatever they could book, and then they would do guest sets and ask them, if you like either one of us or open mics, can we MC, one of us MC or both of us do a set on the weekend for some money? And they did this, and it was intense and difficult. And at times they literally walked in the restaurant to say, can we wash dishes to get something to eat? Like it was really stressful. But
how old were they at the time?
Oh man, I think Mitch was, I think he and I are about the same age. So he was probably 25 maybe, and Chard was about the same.
And I mean, this is just so, in general, comedy is disorganized. Like the industry of comedy, like it's Facebook groups and and old websites and things like, to be doing this at that time.
Well, and this is before any of that.
Yeah, no.
So they are phone calling places ahead of time, or just showing up at clubs.
To even get the number is a pain in the ass.
Exactly right. They had to find the number. They had to call comics they knew in areas, like, where can we go? Oh, there's this club. Here's the phone number. Here's the booker. Try and call them. And then you leave a message or get busy signals. Like, it was old school trying to book gigs. Yeah. And so they went on this run. And so what happened is that Mitch realized that people would give them attention, because it was like, wow, you guys are driving around a van trying to get work in comedy. Okay, I'll watch you. But he noticed that they would only watch about a minute. And then so he had to figure out how to get punchlines in a minute. Yeah. And that's where he started to develop the Mitch that we know, because he was like, I need to get work. So he and Chard were both punchline heavy, just hit punchlines those first minute. Yeah,
super tight.
You got to, because they weren't watching after a minute.
Was he like pretty analytical and like because I heard Attell talking about him once and having like his work ethic with comedy, like how much. Like he always was writing and had like these weird, obscure drawings and things like that. Like what was his, like, was he always grinding and like working or
constantly? Yeah, really? He was always, everything meant something to him. Like one of my favorite jokes of his, because, I'm Hawaiian, so I eat rice all the time. It's his rice joke, right? Yeah. Rice is great if you're not that hungry, but you want to eat 1,000 of something. And I just went, wow, I eat that stuff every day. I never would have thought of that, right? That's what he constantly, his brain could not stop doing all that stuff. Yeah. And I remember one time I said to him, man, Mitch, I just love to have your brain for one day, just 24 hours to be able to look at the world that way. Yeah. And he goes, Kermet, I'd love to have your brain, because then I wouldn't need drugs.
It's true. I mean, I think when you are wired that way, like these guys that are like, what do you even call it? Like an alien or something? I mean, the way his brain, it just doesn't work the same. And I do think like a lot of times in order to get to normal, they sort of like, it's a self-medication process, to like sort of not because you got to turn that off at some point, right?
At some point, you got to sleep. You got to balance your checkbook. Yeah, absolutely. You have to try and find some normality in it all. And it was hard for him to do. Like he always looked at it that way. And it was just amazing to watch him do it. Like one night he went open mic and this bit, it just fell flat. But he was this whole bit about sitting with his friend on a rooftop and this whole philosophical thing of looking out from the, I think maybe it was his house or his friend's house, and they're up on the roof and they're looking out and everything. And just talking about how, you experience moments and yet still as friends, you're buddies, but you're competitive and everything. And it was this long drawn out story. And basically the punchline was his friend says, man, look at that. From here, you can see so far that there are people who don't even know. I can probably see, blah, blah, and talking this whole thing about how far his friend can see. And he goes, so I scooted back a little because then I could see farther. And it was like, and the audience went, wait, you took us on a 5-minute ride for that? And we're in the back going, wow, that's brilliant, right?
Oh, yeah.
But that's the way his brain thinks. His friend is like, wow, look at the world. And he's like, yeah, I'll look at it from back here because I'm better than you, right?
Exactly.
Right? Just a joke, but wow.
It's a Norm Macdonald kind of misdirect too.
Yes, but you're right. That's kind of just his mind is always that way in every situation. And I can imagine it probably was a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Gotta say quick, if you are watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that like, share, subscribe button and notifications bell. Doing that helps us with the YouTube algorithm, so we don't have to run Facebook ads and people can check out this episode. If you have a question or comment for Kermit or myself, make sure to throw them in there. Doing that helps us too. But what was, going back a little bit, and I do have a couple more questions about Mitch, but what was how much infrastructure was there in terms of a scene here when you started?
Basically, you had 2 comedy clubs. The main, there was Comedy Underground and Giggles. And then you had, kind of like today, where you had all these kind of little side venues that did either an open mic or a showcase or a weekend night or something. The only difference is none of them were really run by comics. Whereas now there's so much comic run rooms, which is incredible. It's so good to see. Back then, we all kind of waited around for other people to tell us there was a room open. It didn't dawn on us to really go and open a room because really, you didn't need to. I mean, you can get 6-7 nights of stage time a week and not be a pro.
Huh?
Yeah, there was a lot of open mic. Comedy Underground had 2 nights.
It was indie producers,
bar owners, just the people who own bars, and they would and they're only like now there's a ton of comics, but back then there was only a certain amount of comics, so the bar owners would eventually know all 40 or 50 of us, right? So then they'd contact those who.
God, that's crazy that there was only that number of comics too.
Yeah.
Was Joey Diaz here at that time?
No, he came in a little bit later. I think he was in the late 90s. He came in.
What was he like?
Joey was fearless, man. Fearless. He didn't like when he came in, like anybody, you don't have the jokes yet, right? You're still trying to figure that out. But he had all the personality.
Yeah.
I mean, just fearless. I mean, I don't remember the details of this, but I remember they did one of the nights of the competition was at St. Martin's College down in Olympia. Mm-hmm. It's a Catholic college. And so everyone's like, oh boy, we better, and everything. And Joey did not at all. Yeah. And I mean, I remember they said that they never did the competition there again because of Joey.
Really? Yeah, that's so funny.
He made some implications with like one of the priests who run the school was in the front row, and he riffed with him a little bit.
Yeah.
It was really awkward, and yet the comics are in the back just trying not to burst.
Yeah,
laughing,
die
right?
laughing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So he's always been fearless, and he's just one of those guys that he's a force, right? He's a force to be reckoned with. He walks in a room and you're going to know he's there.
Yeah.
Right. And he was even that way before he got, sort of as famous as he is now. Mm-hmm. He was always that way. He walked in and he engaged with everybody, and he was so confident.
Yeah. There are just it's being in New York recently, like I was there for 2 weeks, and you come into spaces with some of these people and you like see them on TV or whatever. But then when you're actually like, it's this like force of nature almost, where it's like this person is literally born to just make people laugh. Like I'm not, I don't know Joey, so I can't speak, but I've gotten the vibe from him. It's like, if you're in a room with that person, like you cannot like not have, like they're going to get your attention. And it's just this other guy I had on recently, Chase DeRusso. Like I spent 9-10 hours with him in New York, and we're riding the subway and stuff, and I'm like, what is going on? Like it was just I felt like I was in a different world, you know what I mean?
Right.
And sometimes I forget that because I'm around comics so much, that like it just we're so different. Like it's not normal in any way. When you were like starting doing the scene here, how long did you do local stuff until you started hitting the road?
I think it was almost 2 years, maybe a year and a half. So what happened was, I was working at United Airlines, and they were going to lay off a few people, and then but in about 2 months later was going to be the summer where it gets busy again. So I came to them with an offer and said, look, there's a lot of people that said they would give me road gigs. You want to just give me like a 2-month leave, and that way you don't have to fire anybody, but you don't have to pay me, just as long as I get my seniority when I come back.
What were you doing there?
I was I was in the the liquor carts. I was in the liquor department. So those those carts that came off the plane, I would break the locks and take the liquor out of it and make sure that the paperwork and the liquor was the same, the money and all that. And then reset the liquor, like make them all new and put them out for outbound flights. So I replaced liquor bottles.
Damn, that must have been tempting.
It is at first, and then you realize I can buy liquor. I need a job. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But it is at first. So they came to me the next day and they said, yeah, we're going to accept that. So I started getting on the phone. So I had this taste of like a month. It was about 5 weeks where I just did, which really, when you, in hindsight, they were just crappy bar gigs, except for one comedy club that was in Spokane. They were all crappy bar gigs, but I was thrilled. I was like, I'm a comedian, man. I'm on the road. I left Seattle to do comedy, and it was the greatest experience. And after that, I couldn't see my day job the same way.
How much work were you doing though? Because again, going back, everything was disorganized. Like, what was the process for getting gigs? How much work? Like, how many nights were you working? Like, what did that even look like?
Right. Well, so it was a little bit different because you had people who booked one-nighters, because at the time it was the comedy boom, right? It's the late 80s, early 90s. This was 90. Yeah, it was 90. So it was right in the middle of the boom. So if you opened in a big city, if you opened a comedy club, it didn't matter. Just put an awning that said comedy and there were lines. Comedy. Before the grunge thing happened, comedy was the rock and roll. If you think about the late 80s, what are your hot bands, right? It's all like She Blinded Me with Science and U2. You know what I mean? There weren't
Motley Crue, like that.
Right. And that's the thing. Even hard rock became glam rock, right? So there wasn't anything really talking to the young crowd. But then you had Kinnison, you had you had all these comics that were so comedy was kind of like the rebel rock and roll thing to do. And then Nirvana and Pearl Jam came along, and then that all changed, right? And then the comedy audience kind of aged a bit, right?
How bad was some of the comedy at that time? Because there's what happens with that big expansion is that there's more spots, and there needs to be like the quality dip. I watched this documentary with the owner of Acme,
Louis Lee.
Very interesting person.
Yeah, he's a great person.
And he was talking about this boom and how like the problem with that boom, it grew so fast that the quality wasn't there, and then lost a lot of the audience because it wasn't like up to par. And I might be misspoken a little bit, but
that's there was. So I remember when at the time when that all was expanding so fast, they really said if you can babysit the audience for 25 to 30 minutes before the headliner, you can feature. You didn't have to kill. And you would make $600 a week, $500 to $600 a week. Damn. to just talk and get a few laughs. It really wasn't about because they needed features so bad. And it was a pretty crazy time because, and then what happened was, so a lot of people were doing what they thought that person should do. A lot of people, like there was a sort of thing of how to MC, do that, right?
Yeah.
So talk about this, talk about drinking right up on top, because it really gets the audience going. So everybody had their opening, I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people had their opening tequila joke in there. And there was a structure to comedy.
Yeah.
Well, comedy with structure, that sucks, right?
Exactly.
You know? And I mean, and then they were also like, you couldn't take material and everything, but there were hack lines that were kind of going around that you hear it, like the first time you hear it, go, oh, it's a great line. And then you hear it like a week later. Oh, wait, that was a line I heard last week, right?
Yeah.
There were lines kind of being passed around to kind of get you, like this is a good way to, if you have a heckler do this, then you could say this line.
Yeah.
And there were these sort of acceptable, like, this is what we all use kind of thing. It was like a suitcase of jokes that we could all borrow from.
Did you fall into that?
No, well, not really. And I'm not trying to be a saint or anything. I did do some of the things. Like one of the things back then was like, you wrote a joke about what is the town to tease, right?
Yeah.
And so no matter where you are, you just find out what's the town to tease, and you would have that joke with that town. So I did stuff like that.
And for people that are listening that aren't comics, like the problem that you have in front of you in that situation is you don't have the experience yet for that job, right?
Right.
So you're trying to figure out anything that you can do to like navigate that. And
Yes.
there's no guidebook. There's no, all you're getting, what you have is, the feedback if you recorded, the other comics that are in the room who you got to be careful about like which judgment you're listening to depending on their lifestyle habits. And then also like a booker that's going to come and talk to you possibly afterwards, that's going to give you biased feedback based off of their room and what they're looking for. So you're trying to navigate this ocean with no, you have to draw your own assumptions because there's no, foundation or like guideposts, right? Like you're just trying to make sense of this really difficult problem. Like how did you work with it?
Well, it was difficult. Like I said, I had certain things, like I wouldn't use the hack lines. I think I tried to do them at first and I was like, I don't like this. I don't like that I didn't write a line, right? But I did use some of the techniques. But I just remember one time I was driving this headliner, because back then that's what you did. You drove the headliner to all these gigs around the road.
Yeah.
And so we were on a Tribble run. And one day, after a few nights of watching me, he said, look, here's what you need to do. And we had this long drive. And he was one of the headliners I probably got along well the least, which is a rare thing. Like I think for the most part, comics get along pretty well. Like we're all in the same boat. We're all kind of taking the same shots. You know what I mean? So we get it. We know what each other has gone through. But this one guy I didn't get along with very well. But anyway, he just gave me this whole lecture. Like, I've been watching you. And here's what you got to do. And he just started listing all this stuff. Like, you need to talk about sex more. Do you have anything about sex? And I went, not really. I mean, I have some stuff that's kind of. He goes, well, you got to bring that stuff out, and then you got to talk about drinking. Do you have any jokes about tequila? Like, no, I don't have any.
And could he have replaced you with anyone based off these statements? Like,
yeah.
This wasn't like it had nothing to do with you. It's just this is the method that you're not following.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is every comedian has their own voice. There's no guidebook that you can hand to every single comedian, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all different. We all have our own way of looking at things. So it was never about watching me and trying to make what I do better.
Yeah.
It was literally about, here's what you got to do well in these gigs.
Yeah.
Right. But these are, these horrible bars in the middle of nowhere. I don't want to do great in these. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to become the guy that kills in these.
Yeah. That's an important thing to understand though.
Yeah.
It's like those gigs, like if you're developing, if you kill in those spaces all the time, it's probably not going to be an act that's suited for anywhere besides that place.
Anywhere besides that.
Yeah.
Those are their own animal. And you know what? I will say this. They're great because when I started doing those, you're doing an hour. And if it's a bad show, that hour goes by, slowly.
Yeah. What did you do?
Oh man, when you first start headlining those one-nighters and you got to do an hour, and the tendency is when they're not laughing is to speed up a little bit because you don't like that silence, so you speed up. All of a sudden it's 40 minutes and you're almost to your closer. You know what I mean? Like it's because back then you only have you finally got your hours you can headline.
Yeah.
But when that hour has to be done quickly, man, it is a learning experience. And then the other thing is too, is that even if like you look at the audience and you say, oh man, this is just, this is like a redneck bar. They want it dirty. They want it blah, blah, blah. They want it dumb, whatever. That's actually not true. There's ways to get, like, I knew when I went into those rooms, like nobody's going to go, that's the best comic we ever had here. But I know that a percentage of that room goes, wow, we've never had someone that, I don't know, that clean or that whatever, you know what I mean? That if you have your own voice and you can figure out how to translate it, yeah, some of those rooms you're not going to get everybody, but you'll get a bigger percentage than you think. And that's the one thing you don't realize when you first start headlining those rooms. Because you think, I got to kill or I'm not going to get this gig again, right? That's all you're thinking about.
Yeah.
I need to kill.
And I mean, how long did it take for you to, I read your Facebook post about Tribble.
Oh yeah, about the Tribble runs.
And how he was like, I mean, you really wore it, that whole like, I need to kill. And he more or less told you need to fill the time.
Yeah, that was because it was my first run for him.
Yeah.
And I was on the second week, and man, I was not doing well. And we were heading to Boise, and the headliner said, oh, well, good, you'll get to meet David Tribble. And I went, what? He goes, yeah, he lives in Boise. He runs the comedy club there. It was a Friday, Saturday night. It was the end of the run.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to meet David Tribble. I'm eating it out here, right? So I went up to him and I introduced myself. And the first thing I say is, hey, I know you've been getting reports. I'm really sorry if you want to, because we had a bunch of dates on the books. This is right after I quit my day job. So he gave me weeks of stuff. And he listened to me, just listened to me, nodding his head, smiling. And he goes, Kermit, right now, all I need from you is two things. Get my headliner to the gigs and talk for 25 minutes. He goes, that's all I need.
Yeah.
He goes, you don't have to kill. He goes, I would never expect you to come from Seattle out to Idaho and Montana and make everybody laugh.
Yeah.
With every single joke.
I mean, how much did that help you though?
It helped me a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I really was so worried about it. And then the comedy club, and Boise's a good sized city, and Boise's a great town. And it worked more like a comedy club because he had set it up so I had great shows in Boise.
Yeah.
And I realized, okay, I see what he's saying. You know what I mean? I get it. And although it did take me a little while to learn, because the next week I'm out there in other gigs of his getting my ass handed to me. Yeah. I remember at one point, the headliner actually came to my room after the show because he knew that I was just like ready to quit. Like he just goes, hey, let's go have a burger. And he just took me to have a burger and calmed down a little bit. Yeah. Like, I was but it did help to look at it that way, that, okay, my cars works well enough. I can get your headliner to the gig. Yeah. I can do that. So
yeah, I like what you said about the headliner thing there. A big piece of this whole thing is that I don't like using the word fraternity because it's like there's all different types of people in comedy, but that relationship, that family type relationship where you have somebody throwing their arm over your shoulder and like helping, like I don't know if I've been in anything similar to comedy where more established comics are like older, I guess, I don't know, like throw their arm around people and like help, like it's this nurturing environment and they give a shit. It's really cool. Like, yeah. Were there any particular comics that helped you quite a bit with that, or how have you applied that yourself?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. There are a lot of comics who helped me, and still to this day, Brad Upton, who's really funny. He was a big help when I first started, and still is. Like we still talk a lot, and we still work together every once in a while. And I was the same way, man. I couldn't wait to go on the road and hang out with friends and comics, and if I could help anyone, I would love to do it. Now I'm not a guy who goes and gives comics advice, but if someone asks me something, I will answer whatever, any questions, but I'm not one of those guys that comes out like, hey, you know what you need to do, youngster. I just don't see the value in that, because that's the thing about comedy. People want your advice. They'll ask for it. I mean, I've had comics go, hey, can you do me a favor? There's this thing I'm working on, or what can I do from now? And I can only give my opinion. But I don't volunteer it, but I do. If someone asks, I will, because it was done for me. Yeah. There were guys that were willing to answer my questions and help.
It also helps to just like, if you've had that conversation with a comic before and it's like, hey, like I appreciate your feedback, then every time you don't need to ask, for permission or whatever. You can just be like, hey, I saw this thing. Like, this is something to think about. It is very strange when you're a comic and you just were on stage and then somebody comes up to you and just like, hey, stop doing this. And you're like I didn't ask for your opinion on this shit. And like, and even when it's coming from a good place, like it's a complicated thing to navigate. I always try to ask if I'm going to like give somebody a note on something, to just be like, hey, can I give you some feedback on something? And that usually helps to just like, because to just be like, hey, you had a terrible set. Let me tell you why. And I do think there are some people that like to just do that too,
And to me, it's so damn awkward, right?
It's weird as shit.
And really, to me, comedy is your own journey. So if you don't want people to come and bug you and everything, that's great, man. You go do your thing. Like I told you earlier, I'm glad Mitch didn't listen to everybody who just walked up and gave him advice. Because we wouldn't have seen the guy he became. Because he was like, I'm on this journey. I'm going to do it this way. And he did it. He made it work. And so, I kind of think if you don't want my advice, great. That's awesome, man. We all have to figure out what we, and there are some things I didn't ask comics about that I probably should have, but I just decided, this thing I want to figure out. I want to do this my own way, you know? So I don't want to jump in on anybody, but anybody asks, I'm happy to help.
In terms of the other comics that were around, was Doug up here at that time? Stanhope?
No, he never lived up here.
He didn't live up here?
No.
Because I remember I was in a meeting with Pat, and you had told a story about him with doing a clean show and having a jacket.
No, okay.
Or a dirty show. Yeah,
it was a dirty show.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And because I saw him a few weeks later in Alaska, of all places.
Yeah.
And so I said, what is this? I heard you, and he goes, see, that's not what happened. And so basically this club would do this walk the room show, and they would do it after the Friday Late Show. Yeah. Depending on who the headliner is. And so Doug, they told him like, hey, Friday, we're gonna have this great, it's walk the room, man. So you can say whatever you want. And, we try and get people to leave and everything. And it's the Late Show, and we tell them they can stay for the walk the room show and everything. And Doug goes, but I will have already said what I wanted. I don't hold anything back. Like, they will have seen my show already. Yeah. So just let the local guys do it. And he goes, no, we only do it because the headliner does it. You can go up and you can go and say whatever. And Doug goes, yeah, I say whatever. I'm fine. He goes, no, be great. And like, he just wouldn't hear what Doug was trying to say. Yeah. And Doug makes a good point. They already watched him for an hour. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like why would they want to,
That, and it's like, he's not being dirty to be dirty. He's being dirty because that's him.
That's absolutely right. And that was the next point I was going to make, is that he's not trying to walk a room. Because he walks people, that doesn't mean that's his goal, right? He knows it happens, but ultimately this is the way he finds things funny. This is the way he speaks. This is the way he looks at the world. He's not trying to be anything, right? And so all these comics are really excited for Doug to see their really filthy set. Like, Doug, I remember a little sidebar story, and I know it's going to sound really, really arrogant, but I was doing this club, and Doug was there the week before, and after the Wednesday night show, a bunch of comics, young comics from that town, came up to me, and they said hi. They all introduced themselves, which is really weird because young comics don't come watch me. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not a comics comic. Yeah. And I was like, oh, hey, you guys, nice to meet you, whatever. And I'm shaking everybody's hand, and they said, yeah, we all came to watch Doug last week, and he made us promise that we'd come to see you. And I said, well, he just played a horrible prank on you people. He got you guys bad. And one of them said, no, we actually, because we were talking to him about blah, 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 and comedy and all this stuff. And he said, well, here's another thing that, another way you can look at it. And well, come see Kermet Apio. You can watch him. Here's how he blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Doug said that to you? Like, it baffled me, because I know we're friends, but I didn't know first of all, I didn't know he even watches me. You know what I mean? Because we rarely work together,
but he respected what you do.
Man, I couldn't believe it. But that's when I sort of realized that, you don't have to be dirty to impress Doug. He likes comedy. He likes people. He likes interacting. He likes the form of comedy. He likes the work put into comedy, right? He likes all those things. He doesn't need you to say horrifically gross things. Yeah. And anyway, back to the story.
No, so, I think that's important I do have some comics that are newer that listen to this, and I think that distinction, it took me a while.
Yeah.
Honestly, I met him and I hung out with him when I opened for him, like at Neptune, and I don't know if I've told this story on here, but it's a theater, and he's got no one around him, right? Like he books everything bare bones and stuff. So it's Greg Shaley and whoever's like running sound at the theater. And then it's just me and him in the green room. There's nothing in the green room. Dave Dennison was there. He set up the deal, and like we are out smoking cigarettes after the show, and like we're just talking, and I didn't know what to talk to him about, right? Like it's like you meet this guy, it's like this. So
right.
I had grown up on the East Coast, and I started talking to him about Massachusetts and stuff, and then people that were at the show saw him in the alley, and they like ran up and they wanted to take pictures and stuff. He's like, hold on. And he just pulls out his dick and starts pissing in the alley. And it's like all of his fans are cheering him on. And so, like, he's like, just hold on a second or whatever. But it's just, that is just who he is. Like, he's not gonna like hold back at all ever. And I'm like, I went from like being like, I mean, I kind of idolize this person, like to then just like standing next to him while he's peeing in the alley, and I'm like, this is exactly what Doug Stanhope would do in this moment, you know. But it's just so crazy. So when he was at that show in Alaska, like what happened?
Okay, so no, the show was a few weeks before in Texas. It was in Austin.
Oh, okay.
And so everybody's going up and they're doing this horrific material, and Doug has said he doesn't want to do it, but the manager will not. He's like, no, this would be great. This would be great. He keeps saying that. So Doug goes up in a trench coat, essentially, and it's buttoned up. And he starts doing the cleanest, hackiest, like, you know, man, airline food sucks, right? It's just so bad. And he takes a button off. And then he does another premise, like totally like clean, you know, men and women are so different, right? I mean, because like guys are like dogs and women are more like cats. Takes a button off, and he just keeps doing this kind of stuff, right? And he's wearing nothing underneath, right? So he just does this stuff, and then he drops the trench coat, and he's fully naked, doing the cleanest material possible,
That's so
right?
funny.
So the manager's in the back doing his end of the night work, and this server runs in. He goes, "Hey, Doug's naked on stage," and he starts running out. He runs. He goes, "Hey, Doug, get up, come on, get off the stage." And Doug goes, "No, I'm doing the show that you wanted me to do." And he just keeps going, right? And the manager literally has to grab the trench coat, put it on him, and drag him up because he's not coming. So the manager has to go up and literally put the clothing around him and drag him off. And the whole time Doug is screaming, Star Trek would be weird if other actors did the characters, right? It'd be totally different. And I mean, it was just brilliant.
Yeah.
It was brilliant because like you're telling Doug, okay, you can be filthier in this show. And he went, okay, yeah, I'll be filthier in this show. Like, I will break the law to be filthy in this show. And it was a major thing. But then the word that got out was Doug Stanhope got naked on stage. That's what everybody was saying. Like, Doug. So that's why I asked him. I go, you get naked on stage? So and there was more to the story.
Oh, right? For sure.
Yeah.
You had mentioned when I was in that meeting with you that he already had like a following in like I think you said Utah or somewhere, like you had done a show with him and he had people coming out. Like,
everywhere, man. The Tribble runs.
Yeah.
When he was going to those towns again, and I didn't know who he was, they double booked it.
Yeah.
And they double booked it. And so the booker, which was a stroke of genius, convinced them that they're having we're doing this big 2 headliner show tonight.
That's great.
Or the day before, like tomorrow we're going to have a big 2 headliner show. So you got a host and you got a feature. It was the 2 features. It was me and this other feature, me and a feature, and then Doug and his feature. And then
wow.
He booked us in the same room on the same night and then convinced them they were getting a big show if they could just kick in a little more money to pay the
so
2
funny.
comics. Yeah. And so I don't know Doug, and I just know that this little bar in I think it was Ogden, Utah, is packed. Like, wow, man, we got a good audience. So the booker calls my hotel room and he goes, "Hey, man, so you guys are doing the show," and he goes, "I'm gonna have you go on first, and then the other headliners go on second, right?" And I'm kind of like, all right, I'll go on first. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Like doing that comedy thing. Like I'm not saying it out loud because, but I'm thinking, okay. I told him, do you still want me to do an hour? He goes, yeah, that's fine. Or do 45, whatever you feel like. I'm like, okay. Right. And I go on and I have at best an okay set. I'm like, they're not into me at all. Right. I mean, it was like good at times and at times just not good. And the guy introduces Doug, and there's this massive round of applause for when he starts. And I went, what? Who gets applause at the beginning of a Tribble gig? Nobody, you know what I mean? Like, that was so bizarre. And he goes up, and I was like, wow, this guy is brilliant. I mean, I was laughing in the back, and I was so glad I didn't try and say, well, maybe I should go on second. I was so glad, because there was no way I could.
How did that happen, though? Did he, I know he's always been very smart in terms of business, like cultivating an audience. Was he doing anything?
No.
It was just word of mouth.
Right. He became good at business because of that, because he started to realize. So he was just going and doing Tribble runs, and he was getting paid the same amount every time he went. And yet didn't dawn on him, like, this is money. This is like the bars. Every time he comes through is making a lot of money. So all of a sudden, I think headliners were coming in about once every 8 months. He was coming in once every 4 or 5 months, right? And then it started to dawn on him. And then he was doing clubs where they'd complain about how he's walking people, and he's like, I've never not been this, you know what I mean? But people are showing up, and that's when he started to realize I should do this. And so he kind of started that whole, like you said, the rock clubs, the doing it independently, keeping everything real bare bones. That's all something he developed because he was going on these trips and rooms would be packed and he was getting a set amount of money. This is what you're getting.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, 4 shows at a club or a Tribble run would just be packed every night. And
in the business side of this, when you get the agents and the managers and all those people, I've heard him say, it's just people making money off of you.
Yeah.
Whereas he's kept the highest percentage of pennies to the dollar of anybody in comedy. He goes direct to the consumer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he definitely has Hannigan who has done a lot of stuff, and essentially is what a manager does, but they've got a great agreement. They've worked together for years. So, but yeah, he figured sort of that out, that and everybody's thinking, you're going to go to rock clubs? That's not a comedy audience. And you realize, well, Doug's not a comedy comic. You know what I mean? He's and it worked out great. And it was a really, and like you said, he's getting more of that dollar. He's in front of an audience who he knows who they are. There's not going to be that person that just comes to the comedy club to hang out and goes, what is this we're watching? And there's no shock, because
but it's not like he's angry at those people that are coming to it, that are upset.
No.
It's just not the right. It's a weird thing. And I try to it took me a while to understand this. He needed the skills to get to that point.
Yeah.
To where he could define, hey, this is who I am, and I'm not wavering on this. But to be the edge lord or whatever, and be I'm too edgy for you. That's a different. Right. I don't have the skill intact yet.
That's right.
And that's why I'm offending people.
And that was it. Was that he should have been marketed, right? So if you have him come in a club, you have to let the audience know.
Yeah.
But to the club, it was the more tickets you sell, the better. Well, yeah, to some extent, but like with movie ratings, you at least know, okay, this is a rating of this. Not that comics should have ratings, but you should at least let your audience know, because it's not Doug's fault that people come in just because they like the comedy club and they are shocked and walk out. It's not Doug's fault necessarily. It's not for him to be cleaner because there's a few people that might not like what he does. If the majority of people like what Doug does and is familiar with him, he needs to do it. Then if you're going to have him at the club, you got to know he's got to do what he's got to do. That's his act. That's his personality. It's who he is. And he finally figured out, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to deal with any of this if I just do it on my own.
Yeah.
And I don't have to pay them or take a flat fee. I can, the door will be mine, right? Yeah. And like I said, there's no one in the audience that's going to be shocked.
But also he's surrounded, like you said, by Hannigan and people that put in, it's a lot of work, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's that idea of, I'll just do it on my own. like you said with Mitch and those guys, like getting in the van, and I mean, you're in really uncharted territory to do that. And I'm sure there's been moments where it's like, fuck, I could have just done, there's that safety net of like, oh, if I had just done gigs this way, or done, like, cause he could. I mean, it's for sure possible.
But to be able to recognize that, oh, there's a market, I better figure this out because this could work for me. And he did something that really wasn't being done. Although I shouldn't say, I mean, I'm sure there were comics who were doing rock clubs, but not on the volume he was planning to do it.
For sure.
Like he was literally going to clubs or cities where he had worked clubs there. And so he was planning, like, I'm going to this city. He wasn't, it wasn't like he was like someone in Seattle saying, I'm going to go to Portland, try and book a show and produce a show, right? He was saying, I'm going up to the Midwest, I'm going out to the East, I'm going down, and taking a chance on rock clubs. And man, it worked. And he's been able to really sustain that.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about clean stuff a little bit.
Yeah.
Like so for you personally, you work predominantly clean, right?
Yeah.
Or just clean all the time, or how?
Yeah. Pretty clean, I should say. For clubs, I'm really clean.
Yeah, exactly.
But still, even when I do like really like corporate stuff, there's some stuff I hold back, but it's not because it's filthy or anything.
Just not the right fit.
Yeah, just maybe a little edgy for that,
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, clean.
What, like, when did you realize that was the case? Because you had mentioned that Mitch was saying, hey, I think you're on to something. Like, do you just prefer doing clean comedy, or do you, is that just sort of normally how you think? Because a lot of the stuff in your act is, it's not like clean material. It's
right.
It's like your take on it happens to be clean, but it is very funny.
Oh, thanks, man. So for me, it was pretty early on. Like I think I had a couple of F-bombs when I started. I said, I think I had a bit where, I did. I had a bit where I said fuck, and then there was a bit where I kind of sort of hinted at it. But what I realized is I was telling you about the headliner that sort of told me what I need to do, right?
Yeah.
And what I started to realize is, okay, the comics I admire, like my biggest influence was Gary Shandling, who I watch that guy stand up, like I want to be able to do that. That guy is amazing. And he swore. But for the most part he was clean, right? He didn't do a lot of real dirty stuff. And so the comics I liked were relatively clean. And then the other part, and this was the part that, man, of all the bad decisions I made when I was young, this was one of the best decisions I ever made. I realized that comedy was the first thing I ever tried hard at. And you know how I realized that? My mom told me. Because my mom had been with United Airlines since before I was born. Mm-hmm. And here I was considering quitting. And I really, I talked to my mom and I said, look, I'm thinking of maybe trying this comedy thing. And I thought she was going to try and talk me out of it. United has retirement, it's a steady job, insurance and all that. And she goes, I've never seen you try hard at something in your life. You've always done everything to be just good enough at it that people would give you a compliment. But you never tried to be really good at anything. And so when I went into comedy full time, that stuck in my head because I had my mom's blessing purely because she saw me actually care about a thing, right? Instead of just cruising through life.
And did it feel kind of like it came relatively easy to you in the sense of like, it wasn't something you were terrible at?
At working clean?
Just comedy.
I feel like it didn't come easy. Like I wasn't one of those guys. I mean, I certainly watched those guys and envied the hell out of them. But I've always been a fan of comedy. I do like comedy. And yes, when I did my first open mic, I was so scared. And this guy who's still a friend of mine now, who was one of the comics at the time, he stood at the side of the stage. And when I came off, he shook my hand. He goes, "You're going to keep doing this, right?" He didn't even know me. He goes, "You can keep doing this, right?" I went, yeah. I didn't know. So it wasn't like comedy was easy, but yeah, I did have a bit of an idea of it. And
loved it though.
I really loved it, man. I loved watching comedy. I loved being around comedians. So because this was this thing that, well, I think I can do this and I love doing it and I have this passion for it, I kind of decided to make rules for myself. And I sort of realized that, all right, these triple gigs, they're great, but I like the club gigs better, right? the bar gigs are so hard. And I thought, well, one way to do that is to try and get into those club gigs is to not do certain things. So there's a certain amount of smoke and mirrors in comedy, right? There's a certain amount of things where I've seen people who kind of work clean, but they're dirty because they'll do a clean punchline and there's fucking shit in the punchline. But when you take those words out, you look at it and go like, that's the cleanest bit, right? But it doesn't sound that way because there's a rhythm to swearing that helps punch laughter. Right. Well, I never wanted to do that. Right. I've seen words used perfectly. I've seen swear words used perfectly in bits, and they should be there. But I've also seen words that are doing nothing more than taking time and rhythm out of that sentence.
Yeah.
And so things like that, where I thought, okay, let me try not to do that. Like I said, I had F-bombs in my act. Let me try not to do those things, just to see if I can write better jokes. Right. And I realized that if you're writing a joke, there's a certain sexual punchline it's purely an escape. It's purely like I'll just put something here and I know that's going to get a laugh. Right. But is that really how you feel about that thing you're writing? Is it really how you feel about that bit? Yeah. And so I'm right. So it's hard to explain this, but
no, I'm with you.
Are you good? Good.
It's questioning, like, are these words the right words for that situation, or am I using these because they work?
Exactly.
And
exactly.
It's almost like maintaining a level of quality for yourself, of like always asking yourself, am I really saying this because this is what I mean, or am I saying this because I know I can get a response out of this?
And I'm always a little worried about getting into this topic because I don't want people to think that I'm crapping on dirty comedy. No. I love all comedy. Stanhope's one of my favorite comedy. He knows it. He knows I love watching him. Yeah. And so I love all kinds of comedy. So that's not what this is, but it really is about me personally. I know I'm lazy. I know I take easy ways out. But this is the first time in my life, like I said, I actually made a good decision as a young person, but I decided I can't take the easy way out on this because I want to do this longer. And I don't want to just be doing triple gigs the rest of my life. And so it was a way of kind of saying, okay, if you're looking at a bit and here's that punchline that comes to your head first, okay, that's your first idea. Is it saying anything about the bit that you want to say, or is it there to get a laugh, or is it somewhere in between? Is it somewhere like, okay, I can keep that, but maybe tweak this or change that, or tag it in a way that gives it better context, right? Yeah. And so all those things I actually sort of put into sort of my, I don't know, rules or parameters. And what came out is cleaner stuff than I thought I was ever going to write.
Yeah.
But then I started getting corporate stuff, which you fly out to do a corporate and you come back and you just made more than 2 weeks of clubs.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, wait, okay, I can do this. And also too, when the comedy collapsed, when the club collapse happened in the mid 90s, I had other gigs. You know, I was starting to do cruise ships. I was starting to do a lot of corporate stuff. And back then I still had colleges. So when the comedy collapse happened, people who were doing just clubs, they were done. Gone. Plus those headliners were getting $3,500 a week, right? And so when I started headlining, the pay was like $1,200, to $1,400, and I'm like, that's great money, you know what I mean? Because these guys all had really nice cars and car payments and mortgages because they were just living life.
Market was flush.
You're making $3,000 a week, like you were saying earlier. They needed comics so bad that headliners were getting paid tons of money.
Yeah.
And so when that happened, I was able to do other gigs and keep afloat. And then when I came back to the clubs, like I said, $1,200 to $1,400 was really good pay for me. And like so
$3,000 a week in 1995.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost 20 years ago.
Yes.
That would be like 5 to 10 now, right?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
That's great for a weekend headliner.
And gas is 99 cents a gallon. So you drove to your gigs and just pocketed a lot of that money. And it was a ton of money. And like I said, features are making 5 to 6. MCs are making $400. I got $400 a week to MC the Underground. Damn. MC.
Yeah.
I know.
That's wild.
Yeah. And you would do the Wednesday through Sunday was the regular show with the headliner. And then Monday you would host the open mic.
Yeah.
So you got so much stage time in, plus getting $400 when you walked away, and you were working on jokes and you were improving stuff. And Wednesday through Sunday you were watching headliners from television, kill it. So you were learning.
Yeah.
It was really an amazing time. you're getting paid to learn, really.
I remember you were saying something about Brad, and I guess before we move on, was there anything else you wanted to say about the clean stuff?
No, I think that's it. So it was really a thing to challenge myself to work harder. I didn't set out to be like, hey, I'm going to be really clean. It was really setting myself rules that I was hoping would make me better, and not fall into kind of a smoke and mirrors type situation. And then the byproduct of it was, like I said, the gigs that came along made me realize, okay, there's something here. And also too, I realized I kind of like writing it that way.
Yeah.
And really rarely, I mean, maybe I want to say less than a handful of times, less than 5 times, I've actually felt like, God, that'd be a great joke, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
And so I'll let a friend know, like, hey, I came up with this thing, but there's no way I could get away with it. Yeah. But if you think about it, 30 years and 5 times I regretted, I shouldn't say regretted working clean, but 5 times I couldn't use a joke I thought of. That's pretty damn good. What I mean? I'm okay with that.
Yeah. And how much of that happens just normally where it's, you write something and this is better for somebody else than you.
Yeah. There's that too. But I mean, just on the idea that that's too dirty for me, if that only happened 5 times in this long, then I'm okay.
Well, that probably goes the other way too. Like somebody like Doug has a joke that he wants to use, but it's too clean for his audience, and like they wouldn't respect that. So it's kind of funny.
I wish he'd give me some of his clean jokes, exactly, man. I would take that in a heartbeat.
So you're gonna play music for us, but just one last thing. I remember you were saying something I thought was pretty helpful. You were talking about Wednesday through Sunday working at the Underground, watching all this comedy. What was your lifestyle like at that time? Like, were you, because I had heard you talk about Brad Upton before and his work ethic. He like keeps office hours, and I think that's who you were talking about. It might have been.
Yeah.
But like at the time when you were sort of getting started, getting gigs, like you were sleeping in and like, having a lot of fun. Like, when did you start kind of adjusting your process for like making this a full-time gig, and what did you do that you saw help with that? Because I think there are like people that want to work more, that want gigs and stuff, but they don't maybe follow the same like daily practices in order to get that stuff.
Right. Well, Brad's the better person to ask. I don't know if you know this about Brad, but he has an index card for every set he's ever done.
Really?
Every single set, he writes down what he did, and then he has drawers full of it. And so if he goes back to a place that he's performed at before, he can actually pull the index card and see what he did in that gig.
Wow.
And it's really amazing.
I've heard some really awesome things about Brad. I haven't worked with him before, but every comic that I know that knows him speaks very highly of him, and like just his work ethic, who he is off stage, and he's got a lot of respect on his name. Yeah,
he's a great guy, and put it this way: how many 65-year-olds are still headlining clubs? Right? I mean, if you think about that, like that's how good he is. He still brings it, that clubs that always want to skew younger because that's their audience, right? He's still there, right? He's got the highest dry bar hits. He has one clip that has 90-something million hits on it. Damn. Yeah, Brad is, but he is all about the work. He works so hard. When he started, he was living in Tri-Cities, so he was literally driving from the Tri-Cities to do 5 minutes at the open mic, and then driving home because he was a teacher. So if he did the open mic Monday, he had to be there Tuesday morning. So he would drive back to Tri-Cities. He would come all the way to Seattle to do 5 minutes because there was no stage time there at the time.
How far of a drive is that?
Tri-Cities, 3.5 hours. Although the way Brad drives, it's about 2.5. That guy's crazy.
He drives super fast.
But so Brad is all about the work. I was not. I was actually just enjoying life and, thinking like, oh, this is great, and I'll write a few jokes every once in a while, that kind of thing. I remember one time I called Pat Wilson, Booker, and I called her at about 9 a.m, and she goes, "What's wrong?" And I go, "What?" I just did a radio interview. I had to call you about something. She goes, "Oh, nothing's wrong?" I go, "No, nothing's wrong." She goes, "Why?" I said, "Why?" She goes, "You never call me before noon." She thought I was canceling or something, or had a medical emergency, and it was stuff like that where I realized I need to kind of get it together. And then, so when I met my wife, and I know it's going to sound really corny from here, and when I met my wife, she's always been supportive of this. She's never been, I found it so hard to date. Number one, because the first date goes well. And back then, you used to travel a lot more. Now you're kind of closer to your home base. But back then you did a lot of traveling. And so you'd go on a first date. Oh, that was great. When can I see you again? I'll be back in a month. Like they're not going to wait, right? Well, my wife did. I met her and we went on a couple of dates, and I left for 3.5 weeks. And this is back when it was to communicate was calling card. So you had to pay by the minute. So in the 3.5 weeks, we talked one time for about 8 minutes, and she picked me up at the airport and everything. So my wife's been very supportive.
Yeah, that's pretty supportive.
Yeah. And she's always been, she's never, ever asked me to, quit or whatever and everything. So after I proposed to her, so I proposed her right after, in 1998, and this is kind of festivals in their early days. Montreal had always been there. Montreal has always been the big one. And then Aspen came along. So then there were these 2 festivals, and they were kind of the only festivals going on.
Yeah.
But they were big deals. And I remember I got Aspen right around the time I proposed to my wife. I got the Aspen Comedy Festival. I couldn't believe it. Because I was like one of the last people chosen. It was down to like 3 people for that last spot, and I got it. So to tell you, I mean, on my flight from Denver in, I was sitting next to Sarah Silverman and Todd Glass. And there were other like comics I had seen on TV on that little plane going from Denver to Aspen. It was really amazing.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was insane. And I mean, Sarah, so they had, you had a group of 5 people that would perform on different, so group A is going to be on this venue, and then tomorrow group A is in this venue. Well, in my group, Sarah Silverman, Alan Havey, Jordan Rubin. I mean, it was just such an amazingly talented group. So I got Aspen, wasn't ready for it. You know what I mean? Like I was watching some pretty intensely funny comics, and I realized I did fine. Like nobody would say, oh, that guy didn't deserve to be here. But I watched the people that were getting talked to by the industry and why they were getting talked to. And like I said, I just proposed, and that's when I realized, okay, I need to work. I need to kind of be a little bit more energetic about it. And that was the turning point for me. So
that was about 10 years in, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I made Aspen in 99, got married in 2000. Yeah.
So what did that look like for you? Like what changes did you make?
Well, getting up earlier first, calling people before noon, and having a certain amount of time in the day, like you were saying about Brad. Brad does have office hours. Like he really would sit and and doing that thing, like turning TV off. Don't put on music that distracts me, because I realize there's some music I can listen to and work, and there's some music I sing along and I think about that song, and I had to kind of figure out what that was. So things like that. And then the other thing was, I stopped going to LA because I used to go about 2 times a year, but I wasn't doing anything. I was just hanging around, meeting people, whatever. I wasn't really trying to push because I didn't know how. Mm-hmm. And I thought after Aspen, I was like, okay, wait, I need to work. I can't show myself to these people unless I'm way better than what they just saw. I mean, I had a couple industry people come up and talk to me, but nobody was saying like, I want to get you that development deal. They were just like, hey, come down to LA, come meet with me, we'll talk and everything. It was that thing that this guy might have something, so I'll give my card, I'll buy him lunch one day, and then if he starts to get something, I can jump in and,
Yeah.
And so I thought I'm going to avoid all that so I can get better at comedy. And that was kind of in a way a bad move, because it took me away from industry. And I started to, number 1, make more money on the road, and number 2, be home more, right? And 2 years after my wife and I got married, we had my daughter, and I enjoyed being home. And so stopping going to LA kind of opened up this world for me. Like, wait, you know what? How about just make a career and have this family and be that? And I'm glad I did, because I'm really not the LA person. I'm not like, if I audition for something and you reject me, I totally agree with you. I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm not. There's so many good people. Right. There's so many better people here.
Which is a great decision for you.
Yeah. It actually worked for me, because rejection and me don't go well, because I agree with them. And at some point I would have just walked from LA going, you know what? All of you are correct. And the ones that last are the ones that say, nope, you're wrong. I'm going to show you why. And I was never that person, right? But it did make me a better comic. I got better because I started working harder at just stand-up. I didn't try and be like, oh, maybe I can go to LA and try and be a host, or, and I would have been a good host. I'm very good at hosting stuff. I do a lot of corporate hosting. Mm-hmm. But by focusing on stand-up, the act became closer to me and who I was, and that made me sort of better. So that was kind of when it happened.
When you say focusing, like, what did that look like for you? Was it doing more gigs? Was it writing more? Was it kind of
all of that, and the idea that a bit has to have meaning? Because I sort of at that point had to admit, like, I'm not that good of an observational comic, right? I can't put a coffee mug on a table and write coffee mug, just free form writing about coffee mugs and then pull punchlines from it.
Yeah.
I just wasn't good at that. And I know comics that are, right? They can take any topic. And I just realized if I don't care about it in some way, I don't have what it takes to write about it, right? And so it was really learning that. And so now, so much of what I do, right off the top, I'm talking about I'm from Hawaii. Here's what it's like growing up with my name. I'm married. I have kids. And I know that sounds like such a boring skeleton for an act, right? Because ultimately, when you go to comedy, you want to hear something creative and different, something you haven't heard. And here's me saying, I talk about my kids. Every damn comic does, right? But do I have a take? Do I have a way of saying it? Can I relate to people in some way that they would go, yep, that happens to me, but I never thought of the way you pulled that through, right? Mm-hmm. So that became the goal. So it was about writing more, it was about making phone calls more, and emails eventually, and doing all of that more. But there was also a part of like, how am I writing and why? Why am I talking to these people about the bit? Why should they care?
Why are you selling this to them?
Yeah, exactly. Like the idea for what I do is that I want it to be like a dinner conversation, right? And I want us to be, and I don't want to be the guy that brings up a topic that no one cares about and then talks about it in a way that no one wants to hear, right? Yeah. And so I'm trying to build this kind of dinner conversation, and I want you engaged. Mm-hmm. And so that was the goal, and it really helped me a ton to move in that direction.
Yeah. That's interesting. I haven't thought about it that way, where I guess for me personally, like, I don't know what type of conversation I'm trying to have yet, because I don't consider myself a dinner conversation guy.
Right,
like I'm like kind of guarded still on stage, and I'm trying to figure out, like, am I okay with being that way, or what? How can I work with that? But I think every comic, it's going to look different for that dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't recommend my way of doing things to anybody. I mean, it's just the way that I had to carve out for myself. But yeah, absolutely. Not everybody's a dinner conversation, and it shouldn't be. Comedy should not be one thing for everybody.
It's so crazy though that it can be so many different types of conversations. Yeah. And I've been lucky where I've gotten to watch a lot of comedy. Like, of anybody locally, I've seen a lot of headliners, and just being at all the clubs and working with some really cool people. And you just learn so much by seeing that. I think, like, by watching a shitload of comedy, you start seeing those, like, similarities, and what you were saying about, like, it's got to mean something to you to sell it. Like, it's when you see comedy where it's like, why they don't care about this at all? Like, why, if you don't care about it, I'm not going to care about it. And it takes a while to learn that, but I'm glad, like, I'm in that similar place with writing right now, where I'm like, when you feel that, like, it's a feeling where you're like, I give a shit about this. I have something to say. And then you're stoked because you're like, I actually have something to work with here.
But it should be noted that, right, if you look at, like, Mitch, nobody cares about rice. Nobody even he doesn't. But his way of looking at it is what we care about.
Yeah.
I want to hear what he has to say about rice.
Yeah.
Right? When I remember one of his early bids to talk about, I don't play tennis because I could only ever be as good as a wall. And that is brilliant, right? And I know Mitch doesn't play tennis. I doesn't care about tennis, right? Yeah. But so observational can be done in a way that it relates. But I just know, like, I can't do that. I'm not that guy.
He cared about it enough to say that.
Just enough, right? Just enough
and that's what worked for him. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go into some music stuff. Kermit's gonna play some guitar. I got to set up the. I think I'm at. Oh.
Well, can I tell you like how that all came about?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was doing. I just got on the road, and I mean back then you could book a ton of gigs, but they weren't good gigs, you know.
Yeah.
Everything. But you could book a lot of gigs. So I was on the road in this really small town, and this motel was just scary and dirty and awful. And I didn't want to be in it. So I'm walking around. Well, it's not a great neighborhood. So I see this pawn shop and there's a guitar for like $30 in the window. And I thought, well, number one, my hobby just became my job. So I kind of need a hobby, right? And I've strummed guitar in high school a little bit, right? So I knew a few chords. But I also thought, I need something to make me sane. I can't sit in these awful motel rooms and be like unhappy about my decision, right?
Yeah.
I just gave up, medical and dental, and here I am in this motel, right?
Yeah.
So I went in and bought the guitar. And so I would take the guitar with me on the road, especially before they started charging for bags. Even when I flew, I would take the guitar. And I actually had a club owner see me, and he came to pick me up, and I'm walking out with my bag and my guitar, and he goes, "Oh shit, are you a guitar act?" Like he literally said that, and I start laughing. I go, "No, this is just for me in the hotel, man. No." He goes, "Oh God, I was going to say your tape. You didn't send anything." Like he hated guitar comedy so bad.
That's so funny.
He was pissed.
Yeah.
So anyway, it became a thing, and then like the stuff I'm going to play for you today is in what's called slack key tuning, which is a Hawaiians kind of, the Spanish left the guitars in Hawaii as a gift because they came to teach the Hawaiians how to be cowboys, and they left the guitars but they didn't tell them how to tune it, right? So they just found their own tunings, and so the one I'm using is Open G, but the Hawaiians would just find their own tunings, and so I'd listened to this music growing up, and I thought I've never played this kind of music, so I started. I had CDs that I would take, and I would play along in hotel rooms. I sit and play along with CDs. So that's how the whole guitar thing came. It's like this thing that I was just trying to find another hobby.
Yeah.
That's now become a thing where I get music gigs. I play music gigs.
Really?
Yeah. So that's how this whole thing came about.
Yeah. I thought you had grown up playing, so that's really interesting. I would not have. That's a good tip for anybody that's on the road too, is finding something that is going to keep your sanity.
Well, that's why I wanted to tell you the story, because I really wanted to say the reason I'm doing this is because I found a way to kind of keep my mind occupied when I was in these or if I had a horrible, one of these horrible bar gigs,
or a terrible set and you got 24 hours to think about it.
Exactly right. You have a full day to stew over how bad you were last night. Right? And so if I could just play a little guitar before I went to sleep and then, or maybe the next day, it helped a lot. And it's sort of grown into this thing where now I've improved a lot as a musician and do these Wednesday night shows on Facebook, which I started in lockdown. And it's all because I just needed a hobby. I needed something to occupy my brain and keep my sanity.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Where, before you grab your guitar, where can people find that on Facebook?
Oh, just you go to my Facebook page Wednesdays at 6, unless I have a gig. But yeah, on Wednesdays at 6 on my Facebook page, 6 to 7 Pacific time.
Okay.
And it's sort of evolved. There's a small but very, very kind and loyal crowd, and so it's usually about 7 or 8 Hawaiian songs, or not all in Hawaiian language, but mostly. And then usually the last 3 or 4 are not. Like someone requested an Elton John song the other day, and so I learned it that day. And
wow.
Yeah, so I've been doing a lot of Chris Stapleton songs and everything, and just all over the map. I've been doing a lot of different songs. So yeah, so it's not just a Hawaiian music hour anymore. It started that way, but now it's become kind of a lot of stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for plugging it. I appreciate that,
for
man.
Sure, man. Well, why don't we get you strapped up?
So this is a song by a group called Olomana, which they do really beautiful music. The song is called Ku'uhome o Kahalu. And Kahalu is a place on Oahu, which is the island I'm from. And Ku'uhome means my home. And so in the chorus, the song is mostly in English, but in the chorus you hear the lyric, Me ke aloha ku'uhome o Kahalu, which means my love for my home in Kahalu. And there's another in the first line or second line. He says we catch o'opu in the mountain stream, and o'opu are tiny fish that travel in the streams. So other than that, it's in English. Okay. But it's called Ku'uhome o Kahalu. And it's one of my favorites. It's one of the first songs I learned on guitar when I was in high school. And I guess that's it. Okay. Wait, hold on. That's better. I'll start again. I remember days when we were younger. We used to catch o'opu in the mountain stream. Round the Kolau hills we'd ride on horseback. So long ago it seems it was a dream. Last night I dreamt I was returning, and my heart called out to you. But clear you won't be like I left you. Meke aloha, ku'uhome o Kahalu. I remember days when we were wiser, when our world was small enough for dreams. And you have lingered there, my sister, and I no longer can, it seems. Last night I dreamt I was returning, and my heart called out to you. But I fear I am not as I left you. Meke aloha, ku'uhome o Kahalu. Change is a strange thing, it cannot be denied. It can help you find yourself and make you lose your pride. Move with it slowly as on the road we go. Please do not hold on to me, we all must go alone. I remember days when we were smiling, when we laughed and sang the whole night long. And I will greet you as I find you, with the sharing of a brand new song. Last night I dreamt I was returning, and my heart called out to you. Please accept me as you find me. Meke aloha, ku'uhome o Kahalu. Meke aloha, ku'uhome o Kahalu. Okay.
That was unreal, dude.
Oh, thanks, man.
That's really cool.
I appreciate it. Yeah, the song is from like 1976.
I like every time I have a musician come on, it like, I don't know. I didn't know what I was going to be doing when I started this podcast always. And it's just like, it's so rad, dude. I love hearing music on here and getting a chance to have people like show what, I mean, dude, that was, to see you multitask that much and like be singing and at that quality is really cool.
Man, thanks. I appreciate it. You know, there are two things that I've kept pretty separate as far as on stage. And so, you know, obviously you have me here to talk about comedy, but for you to ask for me to do that, it was so nice, man. It was so flattering because like I said, I don't normally, when I'm in some place as a comedian, I don't normally do.
You're not music. A guitar act.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And, you know, I wonder if that club owner is why I've never melded the two, because I just never forget him saying that to me.
God, I haven't seen that much like that style of guitar playing in person before. It's very interesting. Like because I grew up playing music and played with a lot of guitarists, but like my buddy grew up playing classical because it's a lot of similar like styling, at least the picking.
Yeah.
So it's to see it in person, even like just the like holding your pinky in that same spot and like you're doing so much at the same time. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. You know, when I started learning, there was an old slide key guitar player. Man, he was so good. He told me one time, he said, use your thumb and play the bass. He said, if you're not going to play the bass, then put it in regular tuning. He said, you use this tuning so you can have a bass note. So play a melody with your other fingers, but have your thumb hold a bass line. And I worked so hard on that because I didn't want to disappoint him. The guy was at the time, he's passed on now, but he was in his 80s. And you just listen to him play, and I would just stare and be amazed at how he's doing that.
It's almost like piano, where you have bass line on one side and then the melody on the other. So it's to be doing that and singing is like, I'm a drummer, so I know like that, like the multitasking comes easy to me.
Really? To me, that's the hardest thing to do. To watch drummers, that is the hardest thing to do.
Once you get it, it's like riding a bike and you know what you're doing, but I'm sure it's the same way. It's like now that you can do it, you know, like kind of there's that like rhythm to it and that feel to it, but getting it was super challenging.
Oh, I can imagine. So piano players and you know, playing the guitar the way I do, it's the left hand and the right hand having to do these two different things, right? And certainly, definitely piano's playing very different things with each hand. But what drummers are doing are 4 different things. Like that's insane to me. Yeah. You know, and if you've ever sat at a drum set and tried to do it, you go, oh, this is crazy. Like this is to have 4 different things happening.
But to have 10 really is pretty crazy too. Because I played marimba for a while.
Oh yeah,
and did dual mallet. So just to have 4 with actual like melodies and stuff and bass, like I never could get it. I was a terrible marimba player. So anybody that's doing like actual melodies and like at least with drumming, like you you're either gotta hit it hard or soft. Like I mean, there's a lot of different technique, but I'm always impressed. Is there anything else that you wanted to play, or was that?
Oh, well, that's up to you. I could play something else, but I mean. But yeah,
I'm curious about that Elton John song. Like, is that something that you'd need the music for, or?
I think I would because I just learned it the other day.
Is there anything like kind of modern that you might have? And if you don't, like, no pressure.
Shoot, how does it?
Or even just because you had, do you use the like glass slide at all?
I've tried with it, but I don't do anything, not in front of anybody now. I've tried a little bit. There's a lot to learn there.
Yeah. I thought I saw a video of that. I mean, if there's anything else similar to that, I'd love to hear it. But if you don't have anything ready to go, totally fine.
Yeah, let me, boy, I'm trying to think of what I could do.
I'm not trying to throw you on the spot.
No. This is a Chris Stapleton song, and it's called, I love it because it's called Whiskey and You, and it compares this woman to whiskey, and it's just I thought that, man, what a cool song. He's a great songwriter, by the way. Here we go. Okay, so it's called Whiskey and You. There's a bottle on the dresser by your ring, and it's empty. Right now I don't feel a thing, but I'll be hurting when I wake up on the floor. But I'll be over it by noon. There's a difference between whiskey and you. Come tomorrow, I can walk in any store, it ain't a problem. They'll always sell me more, but your forgiveness, now there's something I can't buy. There ain't a thing that I can do. There's a difference between whiskey and you. One's devil, one keeps driving me insane. At times I wonder, they ain't both the same. One's a liar, helps to hide me from my pain, and one's a long gone bitter truth. That's the difference between whiskey and you. I got a problem, and it ain't quite what you think. I drink because I'm lonesome, and I'm lonesome because I drink. If I don't break down and bring it on myself, it'll hit out of the blue. It's the difference between whiskey and you. One's a devil, one keeps driving me insane. At times I wonder, they ain't both the same. And one's a liar, helps to hide me from my pain, and one's a long gone bitter truth. It's the difference between whiskey and you. Oh, that's a difference between whiskey and you.
I know you're clean, but fuck, dude. Like, that was really cool.
Thanks, man. Isn't that a great song?
That's a really good song.
He's a hell of a songwriter, man. He's really good, yeah.
That was unbelievable. Yeah. I'm definitely going to have to check out more of his stuff.
Yeah, yeah. The album that I fell in love with is called Traveler. I saw him on, like, I want to say Colbert or something. And I was like, who is this guy? He sang this really cool song, but yeah, but the album's called Traveler, and it's really good. He's kind of in the country, so he's written a ton of famous songs. Mm-hmm. He was a songwriter for a long time, just had these little side songs that he'd keep for himself, and finally started releasing them. And now he plays arenas, you know, and awesome. Yeah. And so, but the main album is called Traveler. It's just a great album. It's really an amazing stuff. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we go, just a couple reminders to folks. If you are watching us on YouTube, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so we get some more people checking out our channel. Hit the notifications bell so you don't miss our upcoming content. And then if you have any questions for myself or Kermit, throw it in the comment section. Doing that helps us with the algorithm. Before you go, is there anything you want to plug, your own, like anything coming up or website?
Nothing major coming up, but I'm on Twitter at Kermet Apio and on Facebook. Kermet Apio. Kermet Apio is always available when I sign up for things.
I believe it.
And that's with an E. It's Kermet, which is different than most people spell the name. So, that's all I got.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on. And if you are just listening to us, make sure and rate and review us wherever you're listening, and follow us on Instagram for additional content at FNF Pod. We're gonna leave you with Jaga.
I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. I just make the waves, I don't write them. I can hear the lyrics in my spirit as I write them. Why you wanna walk and talk just like them? I can't get caught up in all the hype and the excitement. My wave pool, my wave pool. Welcome to my wave pool, my wave pool. Welcome to my wave pool, my wave pool.